See this? This is perhaps one of the greatest pieces of literature in the English language from the 20th century. This is the complete censor's report on Sam Raimi's epochal 1980s horror movie, The Evil Dead. Now, I mention this because, as you probably know, there's a remake of The Evil Dead coming to cinemas very soon. And actually, when I first heard about it, I was very trepidatious. But there have been some good reports. Sam Raimi himself came on the Radio 5 live show that I present with Simon Mayo. He said, if you want to be terror-freaking-fied, see the remake of The Evil Dead. Well, of course he would say that. He has something invested in saying it. But it drew my attention back once again to the extraordinary response to The Evil Dead when it first opened in cinemas and on video back in the 1980s. It was right at the middle of the video nasty scare. It was hauled through the courts on trumped-up obscenity charges. The distributors fought some of those charges and significantly won a couple of key cases, although they lost others. But I have here the censor's report on how they attempted to deal with The Evil Dead, and it makes for fantastic reading. It says so much about the way that censorship has changed from back then to the way it is now, but also you've really got to admire people who can sit in a room and have the kind of discussions that are documented here. Let me give you some quotes. Originally, The Evil Dead came into the BBFC on film. James Furman, who was then the chief censor, he pretty much got the film. He understood that it was meant to be outlandish and over the top and outrageous, but basically comic. But one of the BBFC examiners said that they felt the film was so shocking that they had been physically assaulted by it, which is a pretty big claim to make about any movie. So they sat down to try and remove some of the more shocking elements. Here's some of the things they did. Remove prolonged screwing into ankle of pencil. Point may be seen going in and resultant bleeding, but turning of pencil in wound must be removed. Remove sight of Shelley chewing off her own hand. Remove close shots of Scotty chopping Shelley's legs and hands off. Reduce to a minimum fluid spewing from Linda's mouth after falling on dagger. And this is one of my favourites. Reduce to establishing shot only the sight of eye gouging and resultant thick slime. Now, there is something about that just makes me want to sit down and watch the uncut Evil Dead right now. But that was just the beginning of its problems. The film went out to the cinema, got great response from the horror fans, came out on video in that already cut form, was labelled a video nasty and was hauled through the court. So disappeared from video for ages and ages with the introduction of the Video Recordings Act, and then began the process of trying to cut it down again in order to get it into a version that could be released on video. So those cuts already happened. Here's what happened after that. The following cuts were required from the first submission. Reduce hand from grave clawing at man's bloody leg and considerably reduce bashing at zombie with wooden post, particularly first half. Also reduce headless zombie spurting blood onto man as it lies on top of him. Film went away, came back in again with those cuts. No, that's not enough. Further cuts are required. Here are some of the further cuts. Clawing at man's face is still too long. Cut second shot completely. Remove entirely the second shot of headless torso spurting blood on man's face as it lies on top of him, and final spurting of blood and gore still excessive. Remove altogether the large gout of blood that explodes onto the hero's face. Took it away, did those cuts, came back, still more had to be taken out. These are the further additional cuts. Remove the end of the shot in which a steak is pulled out of zombie's thigh and distends the flesh. Now, I don't know about you, but reading those cuts lists makes me almost perversely nostalgic for the time when that was what censors' reports read like. Now, things are very, very different now. The BBFC have completely changed. Now they're very open and accountable. They deal with horror movies in a very different way. And, of course, the original Evil Dead is now available completely uncut. But I love those cuts descriptions so much that a few years ago, Radio 4 came to me and said they were doing a programme called With Great Pleasure, in which they read out bits of people's favourite literature. And what I'd like to take part, I said I'd love to, read Gatsby and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and I would do it on condition that I could include in it the BBFC cuts list from The Evil Dead. So we got Amelia Bullmore, the terrific actress. She stood there, she read these cuts out in front of a packed theatre. They went down very well, everybody laughed. Here's the punchline to that story. When Radio 4 listened to the tape of Amelia Bullmore reading the descriptions of the scenes that had been cut from The Evil Dead, since restored, they were so shocked, they banned them.
We're gonna get you, not another pee. Time to go to sleep.